Now, many people like to debate what is the most broken Overwatch meta of all time. First off, people think of GOATs, a composition of 3 tank, 3 support that basically broke the game wide open, at least in pro play, and was a dominant meta for a very long time. Or double shield Orisa Sigma metas that just felt like you could never break a barrier, never get any damage through. And while these compositions were definitely broken and frustrating for the time, I think there's one composition, especially for ranked, that completely broke it, and it broke it so bad that it had to get patched out within a week, and that's Ironclad Bastion. Now, this is going to take us back. In fact, it's going to take us 6 years back. That's how long ago this was. And at the time, Bastion not only got the ability to heal himself, but he got a very specific change, Ironclad, which, when he was in turret form, reduced his damage to 35%. Not to mention, back then, armor operated differently than it does today. Any individual piece of damage was reduced by 5 if it was over 10 damage or more. So if you took a 70 damage shot, it would do 65 damage. Now, if the damage was less than 10, it would just do half. So if you did like a whole bunch of little damage from Reaper pellets, all of those would get halved because they're not chunks of damage that exceed 10, potentially depending on your range. So not only was armor stronger back then, but with the Ironclad 35% passive and his ability to self-heal, Bastion became incredibly hard to freaking kill. Like, really, really hard to kill. Now, even without anything that helps the Bastion, here are some things that Bastion could survive if he was healing during his Sentry mode. He could survive the entire of Reaper's ultimate. He could survive the entire clip of Pharah's rocket. He could survive Genji's entire ultimate, Tracer's pulse bomb, Soldier's entire clip plus his rocket. Basically, he was freaking unstoppable, an unkilling machine, and Bastion did a lot more damage back then. He was much more of a glass cannon, and turret was just stronger than it is today. So imagine a supercharged turret with a Bastion that just could not die. Now, this was bad enough, but when you added on top of that the ability for an Ana to nano the Bastion, all of a sudden, Bastion could just not die to anything. You could freaking Pharah barrage this guy, and he wouldn't die. Nothing you could do could actually kill the Bastion. He could just tank it all. And why do I say that this state of Bastion, this immovable monster, was the most dominant meta, most broken meta in the game? Well, this was only out for a very small window of time before it got fixed, but while it was in ranked, this just broke the game wide open. Well, there was some compositions like GOATs that were dominant in pro play for a very long time. In ranked play, you didn't really see that much of it. And when we were talking about double shield, while frustrating, it still wasn't always the most dominant thing, and there were certain maps that it wasn't the best on. But when we look at Bastion in particular, it was basically the strongest thing so far, to the point that the best thing to play against it was often a mirror, and it was easy enough to play, just protect the president, that it just destroyed every single rank. All of a sudden, every single rank was protect the Bastion, and neither Bastion would die. The only way that you would actually kill a Bastion is with another Bastion, and oftentimes it would be this battle of neither Bastion dying, constantly killing everyone else until one Bastion and one team was left standing. Now, this meta, of course, was very short-lived, and this is why I talk about it as the most broken composition, because it affected the vast majority amount of people for the smallest window of time. Unlike a lot of these other meta compositions that took a while to develop, it was very clear that Bastion was super strong right off the get-go, so strong, in fact, that it got hit on the head with a nail and nerfed back down to oblivion. Now, there was one particular counter to this composition, and at the time, it was Sombra. Oftentimes, especially with a very defensively guarded map and a good position, it was really hard to get your Bastion in position to deny the enemy Bastion. So on attack, even though a lot of teams and a lot of compositions would mirrored Ironclad Bastions even on attack, sometimes it was a bit too difficult, and sometimes you didn't have a team that was willing to work with you. That's just the nature of ranked. Unfortunately, you had players that were just like, I'm not going to play that broken thing, we're just going to do something else. And one of the only ways was to play Sombra, build up an EMP, and then EMP. And remember, at the time, EMP was so powerful, it would disable all abilities for an ample amount of time, giving you a window of time to actually punish the Bastion, because he would get out of turret form. But this was the only thing that could stop an Ironclad Bastion, and it wasn't really that reliable. Because until this point, no dive would do anything. Like, Winston's would just throwing their body at the Bastion, Divas would DM the whole thing, and then they would run out of DM, and everyone would die. So it would just be like inting over and over again until eventually you got EMP and then maybe made something happen. But because no one needed to use their ultimates at all, then the team that got EMP'd eventually would just have all these ultimates to dump, and you needed to close the fight out really quickly. Now, in addition to this, we didn't even have characters like Orisa and Baptiste or Sigma in the map pool yet. So we were typically protecting the Bastion with like a Rhine Diva. That was what was protecting them. You had an Ana for that nade, and then you were playing some other support. It didn't really matter what the other characters were. You just were trying to protect the Bastion if at all possible. But I can only imagine what would have become of Ironclad towards the end of Overwatch 1, when there was still 2 tanks, and there was characters like Baptiste that could lamp the Bastion and amplification matrix the Bastion, and double shields to protect the Bastion. He would have just been an unstoppable monster even more so, and it just speaks to the power level of this character, this unstoppable monster that needed immediate hot fixing. But definitely let me know if you agree or disagree with me about this being the most broken meta of all time, and what is your pick for the most broken meta? Let me know in the comments down below, and thank you for coming by.